few housekeeping items to go over. For those of you joining us live through GetSetup Zoom classes, please remember to mute yourself during the session, but do keep your cameras on if you're comfortable with that so that we can connect with each other and so we can also capture some images to share in the future. If you have any clarifying questions while Todd is speaking, please let us know in the chat and we'll do our best to call them to his attention later in the program. We'll also have some time at the end of the program where you can ask live questions. For those joining via our community live streams on GetSetup TV or Facebook, you're welcome to enter any questions you may have into the comments. And again, we'll try to get to everyone's questions. Now, on to our special guest. Todd Creager is a marriage and sex therapist who has helped couples create loving and passionate long-term relationships. He is the author of The Long Hot Marriage and Love, Sex, and Karaoke, 52 Ways to Ignite Your Love Life, which is an Amazon best-selling book for couples. He has an ebook titled The Little Black Book of Infidelity and an entire self-improvement program to help heal from infidelity. His most recent online program is Divorce Proof Your Marriage. He has a private practice in Huntington Beach, California, and has been helping couples and individuals for 34 years, both in person and virtually. He has been a guest on many radio and TV shows and is a professor at USC. Todd, welcome to GetSetup.
It's good to be here.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
So we've heard about your expertise from your bio, and we're excited to learn what you have to share with us today. So let's get started. What is your absolute number one tip to help partners create a thriving relationship?
Well, that's a good question. When I'm on a radio show and they'll say, "Give me, you got 10 seconds. What is it?" And what I typically say, Wade, is don't wait for your partner to make a change. That you are powerful. That you are an interpersonal center of influence. So again, don't wait. You're the one. Make it happen. Of course, sometimes we need to know what we got to do to make it happen. But a lot of times the real big issue is that we're just waiting. So when I see couples, typically they'll come on and they're sort of say, well, the problem is if my partner could only do this, and I help them see that no matter how you're thinking about it, if you're thinking that your partner's the problem, you're doing something even if it's in reaction to the other person. So always be curious about what you're doing. And if you keep doing the same things and saying the same things and even thinking the same things, you're going to have the same thing. So you're going to have to do something different too. So just be aware of your own power of influence. To me, that's the number one tip.
Okay, great advice. How about your second biggest tip?
Well, the second bit, I would say that, in any area of our life when we're successful, it takes risk, right? So if you're, even to get where you are, or me sitting here, we've taken some risks to get here somehow. We put ourselves out there in front of people, we've put ourselves in positions where we can be judged. There's all those things. And it's the same way in sports, it's the same way in education, and it's the same way in relationships. So that the tip is don't play it safe. Take some risks. Try something new. Expose yourself to your partner in some way, or share. Take some chances. Don't live too comfortably all the time.
Thanks. We've all heard the stories about the old married couple that bickers all the time, or couples that lose their spark after a while. Is this really that common? And if so, why is it so rare for couples to have a passionate, alive relationship as time goes on?
Well, I think it's really not only common, it's kind of an epidemic. I always say this, that when we want to be a doctor, we go to medical school, or when I want to be a great pianist, I take piano lessons, except for my brother-in-law, Bob Andrews, who's on there, who's a prodigy who seems to not need anything but go and play. But for most people, in order to be good at anything, you have to get training. And in order to be a really terrific partner in a marriage, we typically have a role model. Our role models are our parents and grandparents. And, we're not that evolved yet. So our role models haven't really shown us the way to have a long, hot marriage, like I say in my book, or a long, passionate, alive relationship. Or to, how many of us have seen, that mom says to dad, "I'm so angry at you." And dad leans over in his chair and says, "All right, honey, I'm here. Tell me more about it." I mean, we haven't seen that kind of dialogue. So when I get married and my wife's mad at me, do I do I handle it? Do I stay connected, or do we start to bicker? Do I get defensive? If I haven't seen my parents handle pain in a mature adult way, why would I ever? So I just think that we're kind of still at the beginning stages of evolution in terms of couples, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up if our relationships are having issues or we're stuck or this bickering. I think it just means that we all have a lot to learn. We have to be trailblazers, and develop new trails and go beyond what we've seen in our parents and grandparents.
Good answer. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, what about when things happen that put strains on a relationship? How does the couple deal and heal the pain of past disappointments and hurts?
That's a big question. I obviously in relationships, there's going to be definitely minor hurts, annoyances, and the day-to-day things that happen. Uh, so I just annoyed my wife just about 20 minutes ago. It just happens, those little things, right? And so, with those little things, in order to heal, you have to own your stuff. You have to say, "Oh, you know what? I was immature there. I was frustrated, and I took it out on you. I apologize for that." Right? So, in the little stuff, a lot of times it's a matter of, again, not getting defensive, recognizing my part of it. You can see a theme here, right? Recognizing my part of it and acknowledge that, yeah, I could see why you'd be upset about it. In the bigger stuff, and as you've read in the introduction, I do a lot of work, for example, with infidelity and helping couples heal from infidelity, right? Which is a much bigger issue, and betrayal. And how people heal from that is they have to look deeper into themselves and their partners, and look that even behind violations. And I'm not minimizing it. Like I always say, infidelity, for example, it's an interpersonal crime because it steals from the person who's betrayed the opportunity to make decisions based on what's true. And that's to me stealing. And so I don't make light of it. However, when people are cheating, there's a reason for it. And so what I do with couples, even when there's a major hurt like that, just one example, is we need to look for what's behind it. And there's usually a reason why people do hurtful things. And so ultimately, what I do with these couples is I help them redefine the problem. Infidelity is a big problem. We're not minimizing it, but it's not the problem. It's usually something else. It's the person, the partner has such, was criticized a lot when they were younger. And so they get married and their partner was wonderful and compliments them. And then as time goes on, they stop complimenting them because they're busy with kids and this and that. And so they have a coworker at work that starts to compliment them. And they start to feel so wonderful, and it's a slippery slope, and they have an affair. Again, it's not a justification. I'm not giving anyone a justification. It's a very, very hurtful thing. But ultimately, the couple heals when they're able to see that what the real issue is in this particular example, it's a self-esteem problem, or in somebody else, they're so afraid of being abandoned that they've sabotaged the relationship because they had such abandonment in their lives, and they figured, it's going to end bad anyway. And a lot of the times it's more like an unconscious thing. So how I help them heal from these hurts is I help them go deeper in understanding. And then, of course, they have to learn how to handle their situations differently, So even abuse, I mean, again, I don't think people should stay in abusive relationships where it's not going to change. But I've worked with many couples where one person was verbally abusive, for example. Let's not say physically, but let's say verbally abusive, which is bad enough. But they start to get in touch with their underlying, like, wow, wounds. What made me do that? And they they get better and the couple heals. So it's in a nutshell, I'm saying that when people are willing to look at themselves and look at each other in a more deeper way, that these miraculous healings could happen even after some big pain. It's kind of a long answer for that, but it's a big question.
Big question.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. And there are other types of strains too. Do you suggest addressing strains that happen during the relationship the same or maybe differently from strains that we may, as individuals, may bring into a relationship from things that we experienced even before the relationship itself, like traumas and heartbreaks
Oh,
from previous relationships?
that's good. That's a good question. Well, look, everything fuses together. Sometimes I call relationship issues, I say there's an 80-20 rule. 80% of our relationship problems have to do with our past that predates our relationship. And the relationship is merely triggering some of these old patterns, these old traumas that happen a lot, and so what we want to do is develop the kind of relationship where it doesn't keep triggering old traumas, but helps them heal. So not only are we healing our relationship, you and me, but maybe we're even healing some old wounds that you had. So for example, even a simple thing, like if a person came from a family where they were never heard because the father was alcoholic, the mother was busy working, making up for the father, and it was too stressed, and that person learned how to just kind of ignore their needs, and they get into a relationship and they do the same thing because that's what they know. So they pick somebody and they ignore their needs again. It's all about giving, 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 pleasing the partner, not taking care of themselves. And then finally they have symptoms. Maybe they're angry, maybe they're depressed, and then they come see someone like myself, and we help the husband in this case to be that person that will listen. But maybe he's got issues of, he was so criticized, he was defensive. So she never was heard. He always felt criticized. To get them together, he's not there for her too. And so he keeps triggering the old patterns. So that's the 20%. It's a significant 20%, but it's also bringing up the stuff when the person was a child. So what I'm doing with him, for example, is I said, you're going to give her an experience that she's never had before. A person she really cares about. It's really significant to her. And you actually, instead of being defensive, you're going to practice listening. And I help him develop the emotional muscle to not get defensive, to listen. And then she gets this experience of, wow, you're listening to what I'm experiencing. You care about what I'm feeling. This is about me for a change rather than you or everybody else. And it can actually help heal the past as well as the present. So they all kind of come together. And so that's why I always say this. I've been doing this for 34 years. I think I'm trying to keep myself younger than I really am. It's a little more than that, I think, a little bit more, by a few years anyway. And I'm more optimistic about couples than I've ever been. As challenging it is, that we have amazing potential. So I always want to say that when I'm doing one of these things, because we have amazing potential. We got to realize that we've been limited by what we've seen with our parents and what we see even amongst our friends, but we have amazing potential to stay connected through both pain and joy, to create more risk, like I was saying earlier, and to make some, add some novelty if we're willing to be courageous. Being a healthy couple is not for the faint of heart. It's not.
Yeah. How important is romance in a relationship?
Romance. That's a good question. See, I define romance as really very simply. It's anything I do to uplift the energy of my partner. So romance could be as something big like planning a trip to Fiji with my partner for a romantic 2-week vacation. Or it could be me sending her a text saying, I'm thinking of you. You're so sexy to me after all these years. Okay, one takes a lot more time than the other, but they're both romantic because the definition I have is anything you do to uplift the energy of your partner. And, I don't think we see it a whole lot, again, in our parents and grandparents, maybe on Valentine's Day, the man's running into the store on February 14th, maybe the 13th, and getting a card, you know. But romance is actually very crucial. And I've even listened to, I know John Gray wrote some books, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and
Yeah.
he's endorsed my book, and I've done interviews to promote his book. So one of the things he says is that women's hormones, what you want is to uplift their oxytocin and estrogen levels and the man's testosterone level. So you start to ask, what does it take then to increase the women's estrogen and oxytocin levels, which gives them a sense of happiness, maybe even increases their sexual desire. And what it takes is, they said two things. He said two things from his research. One was sharing feelings, which a lot of men are not very good at, but it really helps them raise their estrogen and oxytocin, sharing feelings, and as well as being interested in their partner's feelings. And then the second thing is planned romance, that they found that planned romance can lift her estrogen and oxytocin. So I oftentimes give that as motivations for the man. Oh, wow. Biological proof. Yeah, biological proof. You got it, So anything, the way I look at it is, it's my job to regulate my wife's energy. It's my job to regulate mine. It's her job to regulate hers, but it's also my job to regulate hers and hers to mine. So I could regulate her down. I mean, when I'm here to help reduce her stress by, listening is a wonderful way to reduce her stress when she's upset, to be there for her, down regulate her, but also up regulate her. We do this with children when they're bored. We say, hey, you want to go to the park, right? With your partner, if they're neutral, it's my job to up regulate her. That's romance. You want to dance? Let's put on some music. Let's dance. Again, one of the things that happens with a lot of the men I see is they say, oh, I'm just not the romantic type. And I hear that word. I heard that phrase a lot. I'm not the romantic type. I go, what does that mean? You know what it means? Is you're just staying comfortable. You don't want to be uncomfortable. Be uncomfortable. Ask your wife to dance. Guess what? Boom, you're the romantic type. There you go. You've done it. So.
Good answer. Thanks. What about the role of fun in a relationship?
Fun is really crucial. I think that with couples I see, oftentimes they get so lost in the functions and tasks, they become a task-oriented couple. They'll raise kids together, or they'll build a house together, or build a home together, or whatever they do, and yet when they got together in the beginning, usually it was all about fun. So they need to remember what that's like, and again, fun doesn't mean telling great jokes. That's not the kind of fun. I'm just saying, the intent is to make sure you're celebrating life in this moment, that you put time aside to celebrate life. Working all the time. But even retired people, that oftentimes they're not playing together. They're too isolated. They maybe spend too long not connecting playfully. They live too safely. But, I work with a lot of couples that are been together 40 years, 30 years, 50 years even that. And they learn how to play together again. It's possible. And playing together could be taking a walk together. It could be singing together. I have couples singing in my office. It's weird at first to them. It's like, but they start to remember what it feels like to be playmates. It's really a big part of relationships. I have couples, if they're able to do it, skip down my hallway at my office, holding hands, swinging their arms together. It helps them remember. It's like the body remembers what it's like to be playful. But people will actually literally forget, and it stops becoming a part of their life. Not everybody, but it's really important. And then even in the bedroom, however our sex life is, the most important part to me of it is being playful. And we could talk more about sex, but the bottom line with that is, we want to be playful and connecting, and not be so performance oriented, and at any age we are, and be more into just connecting and being playful together, laugh together even.
You said that you're feeling more optimistic about couples now than you've ever been. What kind of changes have you seen in couples over the decades that attribute those changes to?
That, well, there's more openness. I've seen with men a lot more openness. Maybe sometimes not all of them, not at first, but I find some. Look, when I was just starting out in this field, if I had written my book then, it would have been a national bestseller because there wasn't that many books out there. Now it's one of hundreds of thousands, at least thousands, tens of thousands of books on relationships, and there's books on spirituality and relationship and self-care and all kinds of. So I think people are realizing things are much more mainstream. Um, Going to therapy is not such a big deal. Of course, I oftentimes tell couples when they come see me, you may be coming to see me and feeling bad that you can't do it on your own. But the way I look at it is you're just trying to be above average. I'm here to help you be way above average. The average couple is not doing great. So I'm here to help you be above average. So this is great. And they like that. It's like, yeah, I like being above average. So I think there's more openness there. I also am more optimistic because I've just had a lot of success, in my practice, seeing couples thrive even after infidelity and other kinds of traumas, that I've seen them thrive and heal and become better than they were before. So I'm not saying that every single couple that comes to see me is healed, and not every one of them. Some of them, they really have made a decision for whatever reason not to do that on some level. But I've seen so many people make changes for the better. I can't be anything but optimistic.
That's good to hear.
We have this courageousness in us. We have a capacity to overcome fear, which is why relationships fail. It's all different versions of fear, and we tend to protect ourselves, sometimes by bickering, sometimes by shutting down. But they're all forms of self-protection. But I help people find people, like I only help people because they want to be helped. And there's a place inside of all of us that oftentimes really want more. And we need to find our power, our courage, our playfulness, as you asked. And people have that capacity. So why not be optimistic?
Excellent. You mentioned this earlier, but how would you define good sex, no matter what stage of life couples are in?
Yeah, so sex, there's a lot of myths about sex, right? And I know you're probably aware of it, Wade, too, that a lot of people are going under a lot of myths. Like one myth is that sex has to be around body parts that are working perfectly. It's a myth. It's not true. First of all, even men, one of the big myths is men should always be ready and interested in sex, but men need conditions, just like women, to have good sex. So we need to appreciate that sex is not about performance. Some people, as they get older, they're not able to have the erections, for example, men that they used to have, or the orgasms women used to have, because there's menopause, there's some medical conditions, there's medications, there's surgeries, people that had prostate surgery. You can have good sex despite all that, because when good sex is redefined as we're playful, we're connected, we feel it's not about what we do, but it's more about how we do it. It's about that we could feel good about how we were with each other, even 24 hours later, that's why most infidelity is not good sex, because a lot of times, unless you're a sociopath, you feel bad about what you did. So to me, it's bad sex, because good sex is feeling good when you're doing it, and 24 hours later, you still feel good about it, but it's a matter of connecting and being playful, and it's a place where you could feel safe to try new things, and it's not about how did I do, was I good enough? That's not good sex. If you're asking was I good enough, No, it's more like, did we connect? Were we playful? Did we have a good time? Are we motivated to do this more? To me, that is really more important than anything. And it's, again, to me, I don't define sex, for example, as intercourse, or it has to involve penetration. I'm not against it. That's all great. Sexual lure is great, but um, there's all kinds of ways to have sex. Kissing. I don't think there's enough kissing in relationships. I think kissing is underrated. And there are people that have sex and they don't kiss. A lot. Couples I'm seeing right now, they don't kiss because kissing is close, it's intimate, and it's not mechanical, especially when you're really into the making out, the really passionate kissing. I emphasize those kinds of things much more than I do having to climax. Again, I'm not against climaxing, but I'm totally pro climax, but I'm pro the whole experience, and we need to broaden our idea of what sex is, because for some couples I see, older couples especially, they stop having sex because they think sex is sexual intercourse and they can't do it as well, so they throw the baby out with the bathwater and they just stop touching entirely, and it's not necessary. It's just, it's way too rigid, and it's not based on reality. It's not based on true life. True life, we're not the perfect 27-year-old playboy. It's not the way we really are. In real life, we're humans. We have flaws. We get older. We have challenges, but we can still connect physically.
So we have a lot of older adults in our audience who might be going through big life changes outside of the relationship itself. How can you help keep a relationship thriving as one, or maybe even both, are making big changes like career changes, retiring, etc.?
Well, yeah, big changes, like I have quite a few people retiring. Some people retire really, really well, and some people retire really, really poorly. A lot of times it really has to do with, um, do they have a life outside of work, for example, just to use that as an example. And so some people could get depressed. Obviously, one of the things that we need to do is to take care of ourselves, self-care, as we're going through these transitions, because the better we are at self-care, the more we'll be able to have energy for our partner. I have a friend that recently just suddenly retired, and he's thriving. I mean, he just got into, in his case, he got into gardening, and he cooks like crazy. And she retired and she got really into photography, and they're both thriving as individuals. And so they're just very, they're busy. They don't spend every moment together during the workday, or what used to be the workday. He's doing his thing, she's doing hers. So when they come together, they got something to talk about. They feel alive, and now their relationship seems to have not missed a beat. I'm just thinking of them because we just recently saw them a few weeks ago, and asking him how retirement. She's been retired for a few years, but they've thrived. So I think a lot of it is self-care. A lot of it is looking at transitions too as opportunities, maybe, to spend more time together doing things, maybe taking more vacations if that's it. Sometimes the transition might be a medical issue, though, not necessarily retirement.
Right.
And there it goes back to what I was even saying about sex, that, we need to see what we can do, and to not throw the whole thing out, not throw our connection out, not throw our sexual life out, and to be adaptive and to be creative. But most importantly is to, even though I think it is important to have separate time, is to make time to, to spend quality time together, especially during these transition times, but even when we're not in transition times, but especially during those transition times, it's time to set time aside to stay connected. And I don't care if you're 50, 60, 70, or even 80. And I have had couples in their 80s come to see me. Not too many, but I have some. I have quite a few in the 70s to come to see me. Mm-hmm. But I've had some in their 80s as well. And we help them get out of ruts. That the key, sometimes when they're in a transition, it's an opportunity to get out of the rut that they've been in all along. And so these ruts have to oftentimes do with things they're not doing, like not spending that quality time together, or walking together, or talking together, or sharing together. So these are the things that we need to do. We look at everything that we put attention on has a greater chance of thriving. Even if I buy a plant, if I put attention to it, it thrives. If I don't give it water or sun, it dies. Relationships are no different. We got to give it attention. And so during transitions, we need to, no matter what the person's going through, if we give each other some time, some attention, some quality time, yeah, it's a good chance it'll thrive.
So what if one person is really wanting to make changes in the relationship and the other isn't really interested in making changes or might be happy with the way things are? How do you coach couples who may not be on the same page?
Well, that's a good question. Um, I do everything I personally can do to help the person who is resistant to change, to motivate them, just to say, hey, you're settling. There's actually better things. There's, look, if you're in a relationship with someone who is not satisfied, who wants change, you are being affected by that person in a negative way. If you're around someone who's dissatisfied, and I go, how much better would life be for you if your partner was satisfied? And is the real issue is that you're afraid, is that you're clinging to your comfort zone. And let's look at what it could be if you made some changes. And I try to help them build an idea or an image, a sense of what it would be like if they got into the growth mode. The truth is that when a person is absolutely adamantly into what I call the fixed mindset, like this is my life, this is who I am, I'm never going to change. And if I'm not successful at motivating them, then the only thing I remember I had a couple come to see me years ago, and I saw her first for 2 sessions. And then he came in and he said, I just want to say before we start, I'm not interested in doing anything different, thinking anything different, saying anything different. I'm just going to be who I am. She's going to accept me. And I looked at them and I said, let's end it. Let's end it. We're done. I said, if you want to come back so you can help deal with a partner where you're feeling kind of deadened in a dead relationship, I'll help you cope with that, but I have nothing more to help. And I did it for dramatic purposes. And I thought maybe that would turn him around, but no, he was happy and he walked right out of the session. And that was it. And I never saw them again. But that's rare. That's rare. But usually, he was just so adamant about that, that no, can't help them. When you have to accept it. Then the other person has to decide, do I want to stay in this relationship, or do I want to leave? If I could stay in it and find other ways to be alive, or do I leave? It's not always an easy answer if you have kids and grandkids, and I understand that, but my job is try to motivate the unmotivated. And I'm successful most of the time, but not all the time.
So how does your relationship advice differ, or does it, for young couples versus older couples?
Well, young couples, oftentimes the biggest challenges they have is they're just into that upwardly mobile, at least my clientele. They're working, the guy or the woman, it's not just the guy, people are working so much, they have little kids, and they're suffering as a couple. But for me, what I really work with them is to find time to spend together. I usually tell those people, look, you're spending 10 hours a day minimum on work. You spend 10 minutes minimum, you spend 10 hours minimum on work. If you spend 10 minutes minimum on each other with quality time, you're going to make quite a difference in your relationship. And I would say that to them. I would say, could you imagine spending 10 minutes, all you need to do is spend 10 quality minutes at work and you'd be successful? Because it's true, even 10 minutes of quality time with our partner, minimum, could do the job. With older couples, they oftentimes have more time, but they've gotten into these ruts after decades sometimes. And so my advice to them is to not be limited by their past, to not be stuck in their past, and to realize this moment here is the first moment of your future. and don't base your future on your past. And it's to help them get out of this idea that you can't teach old dogs new tricks kind of thing. It's not true. We could change right now, do something different. It just takes the courage and the willingness to try something new. So I would say that's probably the biggest difference. And the only other thing is too, the things that happen with more losses. People have lost more, of course, than older. So dealing with grief, helping them grieve, helping them adapt to situations where there might be some limitations they didn't have when they were younger. And again, like I said earlier, not throwing the whole thing out, their love life, their intimate life, just because they can't do what they once did. So I think that's the biggest difference.
So we've been talking mostly about couples, but what about finding new relationships? Sometimes older adults find themselves alone for circumstances they can't control, like the passing of a partner. What advice do you have for people who are looking for love or looking to create a thriving relationship after a loss?
Well, I mean, I think they need to grieve, right? It's important to grieve first. I think that people that are trying to right away get into a relationship too quickly, it could become a problem. So the first thing is to grieve fully and to recognize the loss if they've gone through a loss, but at the same time that we're allowed to enjoy our lives to the very, very end. And we have a friend who lost her husband, a dear friend of ours, way too early, and she went, got involved with a man a couple of years later, and her kids, especially one of them, has had a terribly hard time. She's angry at her mom. How dare you replace our father? These are adult children, but you'll see that. And she was good to herself. She learned to appreciate herself enough that I'm entitled. And so you don't want to feel guilty about, you're not betraying anybody by having a life beyond you. So those are the psychological things that are important, that really make sense. And I think then the question is, what do you do? And I mean, the biggest thing these days is online apps, right? I think Silver Singles, what are some of the others that are around there? I'm blanking. Even Match that has that for older people, but there are other you can just Google apps for people over 50 or over 60 or whatever, and there you got and to be willing to go for it. And I mean, one of the advantages to doing this when you're older is that oftentimes you're a little more comfortable in your own skin. Sometimes you're not trying so hard. So I would say overcoming the guilt, grieving fully, overcoming the guilt, and then taking chances again, and remembering that you have a right to enjoy your life and to be alive. You're alive, enjoy your life and go for it.
So we're kind of reaching the end of the interview. Is there anything that you want to tell us that I didn't ask you about?
Let's see. Now you really covered the gamut, but again, I would emphasize that we just need to be aware that our relationship, no matter what we're in today, there are things we could do differently to make it more alive. This is not just about endure. You're not in a relationship to endure it. You're in a relationship for, sure, it's wonderful to have safety. I think there's two big important aspects of relationships: safety and adventure. Safety and adventure, right? And so we want to develop that kind of safe relationship, and that takes some work, because again, a lot of couples, it's been rare for couples, too rare for them to feel like I could express things and you'll listen without being defensive. So that's very important. I would say communication. That's one thing maybe I didn't mention, but healthy communication, learning to make your connection stronger than any pain or any defensive reaction, is the most important thing you can learn. And you can learn it at any age. You can start just like you go to the gym and develop physical muscle at any age, you could develop emotional muscle at any age.
All right, great. Well, we do want to allow some time for questions from their audience. So if anyone has a question they'd like to ask Todd, just go raise your hand, or literally, or if you know how to do the Zoom hands up, do that and we'll unmute you so you can ask your question. I've got an easy question for you from the chat. How long have you been married, Todd?
It's going to be 37 years, August 12th. 37 years. Yeah, and I have two daughters, 28 and 25.
Okay.
So, yeah, and I got to try to walk my talk. I'm not saying I'm perfect, that's for sure, but I sometimes will be working with a couple and I go, wow, they're really listening to me and they're really doing better. Maybe I should listen to my own advice. And then I go home and practice. So, I mean, it's like that.
Another question. Well, what if you don't have the finances to go to couples therapy? Any suggestions of how to get support for your relationship without a therapist?
Well, I mean, there are some things, by the way, I guess this is a good time to say, go to my website, www.toddcreager.com, TODDCREAGER.com, or even better yet, you could go to, for this call, I was telling Wade, toddcreager.com/DPYM, which stands for Divorce Proof Your Marriage. You don't have to be married. It's in any committed relationship or any relationship, but toddcreager.com/DPYM, and you get a free, ebook on how to divorce proof your marriage. And I have a lot of other free material there, a lot of good articles and blogs, and they can be really helpful. I have programs too there that cost money, but a lot less money than therapy typically. Mm-hmm. And they can guide you with me, doing the video. So a little plug for my products. I have products on divorce proof your marriage, is like I said, the latest one, heal from infidelity, and some other products, even products on meditation. So they're all there on my website too. So that's one answer to that problem. Typically, there are going to be places in your area that will give free or sliding scale. I know in my area, we have a few places in Orange County, California that I'm aware of, but I would think that there are places that are funded that you could do that as well.
And we did put links in the chat to your website and to that ebook as well. So
great. Yeah.
So any questions from the audience? Just raise your hand or.
It's just the kind of subject that's not quite as easy to share. So it's intimate, but yeah, definitely. I'll love to answer any of your questions.
Got another question. Have you experienced couples with cultural differences that seep into the relationship? And what advice do you have on that?
That's a great, great question. And yes, more and more. And I'm a professor too, and I teach about this stuff on dealing with culture. I teach at USC in the Graduate School of Social Work. They definitely have, cultural issues. Just like even coming from different families, and different kinds of families can seep in. Different cultural issues can seep in. Some couples deal with it pretty well. Some intercultural couples, they do a nice job of honoring both cultures. Sometimes one culture, one of the families from that culture, it kind of dominates, and the other one, the culture goes invisible for a while, and that could bring resentment. So some couples decide to break away from the cultures entirely for a while just to kind of find their own way. But typically it could definitely seep in. I'm just trying to think quickly of some. I have one couple, for example. He's from Cuba and very kind of conservative outlook on things, his family, and he marries a woman from Iran who's way more open and liberal, and of course his family did not accept they wanted him to marry a Cuban, a very, and he not only didn't marry a Cuban, he married someone that a more ethnic and Middle Eastern woman, very different. And so a lot of their issues are having to do with how to deal with the culture, and how he, for example, he doesn't want to sever a relationship with his parents, but wants to honor his wife and honor their culture. And so and I've many situations like that it can seep in. And what I do is I want to help the couple stay strong, and make sure that there's a boundary around them, and that they don't let the families or even their cultures break them. They need to appreciate each other. They need to compromise. They need to negotiate and make room for the other person. In good relationships, both people feel like you've made room for me, versus if one feels kind of invisible, that becomes a problem.
There was a comment in the chat that brings up another question. What about unmarried couples? Are any special problems and issues that they face versus married couples?
I don't see a whole lot of difference. If they're committed, a committed couple that is not married pretty much is going to have similar. It's the commitment thing, right? If you have committed to a monogamous relationship, I would say, then whether you're married or not, it has similar issues. Those that say, let's not have a monogamous arrangement, let's have a different kind of arrangement, well, those are going to be different issues, but it's not because they're married or not married. It's because of monogamy versus, non-monogamy, for example. But I think they're pretty similar. I mean, obviously, the only difference is that with married couples, if they're having problems, they may be less inclined to divorce and more willing to work it out because it's more of a hassle. Or if you have kids, it's more of a hassle. Sometimes people see me and say, I'm only here because of the kids, or I'm only here because I can't afford to be without my partner. And I go, all right, that's a good starting point. That's the way it is. Now let's see if we could keep you together because you want to be together. But other than that, it's for me, I haven't found a whole lot of, once there's a sense of commitment, a lot of these issues a lot of issues with couples don't come up until there's a commitment. That's when the problems start sometimes. It's almost like that's when all their issues from the mothers and fathers come into the relationship. So they're very similar.
So we're nearing the end of our time together, so I think it's probably time to go ahead and start wrapping things up. Thank you so much, Todd. It's been fascinating having you here today and learning about how to keep our relationships thriving.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking to you, and those were really good questions, and I enjoyed it.
Okay, great. And to continue learning about Todd, again, check out his website, toddcreager.com, and check out his free ebook on divorce-proof marriage, which is in the chat. We're also going to be included these links in the email coming up following the event. Okay. So I want to thank our audience here in the front row class and our live stream communities. If you would like a recording of this event, please email support team here at help@getsetup.io. That's help@getsetup.io. If you're new to Get Set Up, we hope you've gotten a taste of what we do. We have over 500 online classes weekly, all designed for older adults, taught by older adults, and the classes are all free as we work with local governments, communities, and Medicare organizations who support their members with free classes. I also want to draw attention to relevant classes on Get Set Up. If you like this event, we have other classes you might enjoy as well. Look for the link to sign up for our classes in the chat here in the Zoom, in our live stream, and at our website, www.getsetup.org. And remember, everyone who registered will receive an email after the event with follow-up links and notes, including links to some of the relevant classes and other exciting upcoming guest speakers. We look forward to seeing all of you in a future class. Thanks, and everyone have a great day. Thanks for attending. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.